How do you know you're in Colorado? Well, when your pastor, your intern pastor, Troy, takes opening weekend of archery season off, that's how you know you're in Colorado. He is up. He texted me a picture last night of what he called base camp. This beautiful picture of the sunset and the mountains and the trees. It looked conspicuously like a Courtyard Marriott, but I don't know. He said he was up hunting, whatever. I'm not sure. Before we get started, I am going to check the time. I don't want to do make happen what happened last time I spoke. Thank you so much for your grace. I've said that before. I can't thank you enough for your grace asking me to speak again. I guess technically you didn't ask me, Troy did. But thank you for allowing me this time to speak. So, we Christians, we believe some really crazy stuff. My personality is such that I constantly have to play devil's advocate with myself. The virgin birth, really? I mean, don't get me wrong, I believe in the virgin birth, but isn't it kind of crazy when you really get down to it? Jesus is God, not just a man, he is God in the flesh, incarnate. The resurrection, do you believe in the resurrection that it happened? I mean, I do. Heaven, hell. Is it necessary to be a Christian to believe in these things? Well, I know Christians, they call themselves Christians, they don't believe in heaven or hell. They think it's a metaphor. I don't believe that. I believe they are actual places. Do you have to believe in heaven and hell to be a Christian? I don't know. I think Jesus spoke about them. You almost have to think that he was maybe stretching the truth, lying maybe. And if you believe Jesus is a liar, why would you believe anything he said? However, there are people that believe heaven and hell is not real. Some things don't really matter. I know Paris was a post-tribulation rapturist when you're talking end times. Does anybody know what that means? If you do, you'll know I am a pre-tribulation rapturist. That's what I believe. Okay, who's on my side? Who's right, who's wrong? Well, we'll all find out, won't we? It doesn't really matter. Those things don't matter so much. But who is Jesus? Really, that's what it all comes down to. Who do you believe Jesus is? John chapter 10, verse 30 in the NIV. Make no mistake who Jesus said he was. Thank you, Emily. Jesus said in John chapter 10, verse 30, I and the Father are one. Does it get any more clear than that? You do have to believe that Jesus was God to be a Christian. If he is not who he said he was, you really only have three conclusions about Jesus. One, he was a liar. He knew he wasn't God, but he decided to deceive us all and lie, or try to deceive us all. And if he is a liar, why would you believe anything he said, like I was just talking about? It's possible that he was a lunatic, that he thought he was God, but he really wasn't. We have people all the time, current day, that say they're God, that think they're God, that think they're even just a messenger of God, that are not. And again, if he was so deluded of mind that he didn't understand he was not God, how could you believe anything he said? The other option is to believe that he is actually who he said he was. That's what I believe. So why do you, personally, why do you believe? Have you ever asked yourself that question? I ask myself that all the time. And I think I ask myself that question because I'm concerned with follow me, if you can follow this kind of crazy brain that I have. I really am concerned that the people that I meet know what I believe. I'm a construction guy. I work in construction. That's a rough field. And it's important that those people know what I believe. I don't talk it all the time, but I often think to myself, if I am trying to live a life that is separate, that is maybe more noticed than everybody else, a little bit different, why do I do that? And why would these people be interested when I have this crazy notion that this guy born over 2,000 years ago was born from a virgin? Born from a virgin, was God himself, was resurrected, is going to come back someday to pick us up. This is some crazy stuff. And why would you believe it? Just because I think it? Just because I've kind of arranged my life around this core set of beliefs? Do you ever think that yourself? That's what I'm asking you. Do you have nods? No? Yeah, thank you. Thank you for throwing me a bone. I appreciate that. John chapter 20. And so for all of you that think that way, this is for you. All three of you. John chapter 20, verses 24 through 29 in the NIV. Now Thomas, also known as Didymus, this is the NIV also, one of the 12 was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here, see my hands, reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." Thomas said to him, "My Lord, my God." Then Jesus told him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." So, I'm here to announce today that I am in Thomas. I'm that guy that wants to see the holes, the cut in the side. That's just me. There's nothing wrong with being that guy. I mean, there's really nothing wrong. I may not be blessed, like Jesus said, "Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." But that's still me. And if it's you, you're going to enjoy this today. This kind of attitude that I've had, this devil's advocate tricks with my mind, has taken me on what I like to call a journey of faith. Opportunities to see God work and how that strengthens my faith. And that's no different than any of us. And that's why seeing Mitzi up here was such a powerful thing for me, because it represents a powerful step of faith. To hear what she said at the end, how Jesus has been everything to her through one of the darkest times of her life. Does that not lift your faith? It's absolutely amazing to me. And those little things, stacked on each other, are what builds our faith, what allows us to pass our faith down to our children, to our grandchildren. And so I call this a journey of faith. You know, God is not asking for blind faith from us. He's not asking that we just accept and leap off the cliff. There are actually, by some counts, over 350 prophecies that Jesus fulfilled. Those are things we can look back and say, what are the odds that one man being born at one particular time would fulfill all these prophecies? 350. The odds that he would fulfill, I think it's 11 of them, are in the billions to one. There's 350. So we're not asked to be just accept this craziness, as the world would see it, as just blind faith. There are actually reasons to believe. You know, I was in Israel about 10 years ago, And we had a really terrific tour guide. He was fantastic. He was a Christian, born a Jew, converted Christian. He knew his Bible really well. And we're driving in the tour bus. We're cruising down, headed to Capernaum. And as we're driving, he said, "Hey, the wreckage of the town, the little ruins of this town right here, as we're passing by, that's a city called Bethesda." And we drive a little further, and I'm like, okay, drive a little further, and there's a city called Chorazin. That's interesting. They sound familiar, but I don't recognize them. As we're driving to Capernaum, he pulls out his Bible and he starts reading. There's two passages in the Bible, one in Matthew, one in Luke, where Jesus cursed 3 cities for not accepting him, for not repenting. And Jesus cursed these cities, and he's making the comment that there they are, the ruins of these cities that Jesus cursed. And Capernaum was included. And Capernaum was also just ruins. Is it a coincidence that Jesus cursed them and then they are gone? They're relics of history? Well, maybe a coincidence. But more than likely, it is a result of Jesus telling us. This is prophecy fulfilled. This is a simple little thing as we're driving down the road that has, to me, meant, I've brought this up to a lot of non-believing friends. I said, how do you explain that? How do you explain randomly, it gets put in the Bible, this is written thousands of years ago, and here it is, here these cities are ruined. That's a faith building. That's a block of faith that builds up. Hebrews 11:1. What is faith? And by the way, this is some very rudimentary stuff. This is real basic stuff. I question myself. Why was God asking me to speak this message today? And I don't really know. I know it's very basic. I know it's rudimentary. But here we are, and I just bear with the fact that it may be for you kind of basic stuff. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1. This is in the Phillips translation. Now, faith means putting our full confidence in the things we hope for. It means being certain of things we cannot see. We also know from Hebrews chapter 11, verse 6, verse 6 says, without faith it is impossible to please him. The man who approaches God must have faith in 2 things. First, that God exists, and secondly, that it is worth a man's while to try to find God. So we learn what faith is. Faith is putting our full confidence in things we hope for, being certain of things we cannot see. And we know that we have to have faith to please God. Where does that faith come from? Interestingly enough, this is one of my favorite verses in the Bible, Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8. For it is by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not from yourselves, it is the gift of God. So in the Greek, it's clear that the gift that it's referring to goes back to both grace and faith. That is to say that the faith it takes to believe in God, that he requires from us to be saved, is a gift from God himself. It doesn't come from us. Everything that it takes to acknowledge who God is comes from God. It does not come from ourselves. How do we build these blocks of faith? How do we get to that point? How do we, when we are talking to our neighbors, to our co-workers, what is our job in relation to building that faith in their life so they will come to a knowledge of Jesus Christ? It has been said that faith is a muscle. And the more you exercise it, the more you grow. And whether we realize it or not, we are all exercising our faith muscle. The question is, our faith in what? You know, we can have faith in things that are positive, faith in things that are negative. For example, I am, as I said earlier, I'm in construction. I'm self-employed. I've been in this town about 22 years, and I've built up a reputation that I don't have to make very many phone calls for work anymore. I get a lot of phone calls to me. And you get to a point, especially I think if you're a man and if you're in your 40s or 50s and you're kind of moderately successful, that you start thinking, I am all that, aren't I? I don't need God. I don't need God. Well, I used to pray for work. I haven't prayed for work, I can't tell you how long. Matter of fact, now I'm praying for less work. I've said before that when I pray for God to bless me as a self-employed guy, He blesses me with more work. As I tithe, He gives me more. He gives me more work. So maybe what I need to do is start tithing less so that my work load will go down. I'm trying to find that sweet spot. How much do I give so I don't get too busy? He hasn't let me know yet. I got to keep giving. But I have built that faith in myself. And I'm not saying that's a good thing. I have relied less and less on God the more successful I have gotten business. I don't know if this is a confessional or a sermon, but you can build faith in things that are difficult. You can build your faith in something that maybe you have a difficult time with, but that is not godly. My wife, for example, she just stepped out. Thank goodness. Is deathly afraid of flying. She hates flying. The first time we flew as a couple, we were heading to Oklahoma to go to a 5-day outdoor musical concert called Rocklahoma. 80s music. I think Bret Michaels was playing, all kinds of crazy stuff that she likes. And I remember flying with her that first time. And she's the kind of flyer that when the plane banks right, she veers left so it won't tip over and flip. It's like it's up to her to keep the thing from rolling. And tense, it would oftentimes take a couple shots before she'd get on the airplane. And even that wouldn't always do it. Not just joking, she wouldn't take shots. You know, at least not two. But she was so nervous getting on the airplane and sweating. The last time we flew, she fell asleep. Now, what's the difference? The difference is that we have flown about 1 million times since then. Her faith in the airplane's ability to defy gravity, I don't know, the pilot, just having done it enough times has increased her faith to the point where she's not nearly as nervous anymore. So you can increase your faith by repetition. There are ways to increase your faith. But there are some negative things too. There's a doctrine that's very popular in the Christian world right now that says if you have enough faith, there's no reason for you to be sick. You don't have to be sick. God wants to heal you. If you have enough faith, He will heal you. If you have enough faith, you can have as much money as you want. God wants to give it to you. You just have to have faith. I have a real problem with that particular doctrine. I call that faith in faith. Faith is not a formula. It's not a magic. It's not a open sesame. It's not puppet strings telling God what you want. Well, God can't deny me because I have the faith. And this puppet strings that I'm moving, that I call faith, will make God give me what it is that I want. It is not that. If that were the case, Paul, we all probably know the story of Paul having the thorn in the flesh, as he called it. He asked 3 times for God to remove this thorn in the flesh. Most people believe that was a vision problem that he had. Nobody really knows. But 3 times God said to Paul, my grace is sufficient for you. I'm not healing you. I know what you're doing for the kingdom. You're going to have to deal with this physical ailment. And is it because Paul didn't have faith? Of all people, was Paul lacking in faith? I think not. So we can kind of get overboard on this whole concept of faith. Faith in itself is worthless. It's faith in Christ. That's where our reliance is. You know, atheists have faith. You know how much faith it takes to be an atheist? It takes maybe even more than it takes to be a Christian, to believe. To look at what we look at, to look at creation and say, there is no God. There's a great quote from the book Life of Pi. If I can find it. Over here. This is from Life of Pi. I'll be honest about it. It's not atheists who get stuck in my craw, but agnostics. Doubt is useful for a while. We must all pass through the Garden of Gethsemane. If Christ played with doubt, so must we. If Christ spent an anguished night in prayer, if he burst out from the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me? Then surely we are also permitted to doubt. But we must move on. To choose doubt as a philosophy of life is akin to choosing immobility as a means of transportation. I love that quote because I like the concept that to not believe in God takes a step of faith too. And I know, apparently I hang out with some dubious characters because I know a lot of atheists in this town. And one thing that I have noticed about them is that they hang out with other atheists. They do what we do. We hang out with other Christians, they hang out with other atheists. And they talk about all their wonderful atheist philosophies. And that builds them up. It encourages them that what they believe is actually true. What's wrong with that? Well, except for the fact that they're wrong, there's nothing wrong with that. We do the exact same thing by coming to church, by going to picnics together like we had yesterday, by having ice cream making competition, and I got ripped off that. There was how many competitors? One competitor, so the winner was actually a loser too. I didn't want to say that. I didn't even get to taste it. I feel totally ripped off. But we build our faith that way. We build our faith by connecting with one another. That's why I love the name Connection Church. There is nothing more faith building than coming to church on Sunday and talking about what God did in your life that week. That builds our faith. So my question to you, and this is in an attempt for you to kind of build your story of faith. Where did it start? Where did your journey of faith begin? And it's only important that you, I think about that and have that in your head, because there will come a time when someone asks you about it. If you put yourself in the position associating with dubious characters like I do, there will come a time. And the great thing is that God will bring experiences into your life that build your faith, that require you to rely on Him only. My favorite biblical story is in John chapter 9 of building faith. So the story goes, this is where Jesus heals a blind man. And I love this story because it starts out with a misconception that the disciples have. They're walking down the street, they see this guy blind, and the disciples ask Jesus, who sinned that this guy is blind? Was it his mother or his father? Their conception right off the bat is completely false. Somebody must have sinned, he's blind. Jesus said, you've got it all wrong. How about the fact that, have you ever considered that maybe he's blind so that I can be lifted up so that I can heal him. And so Jesus, we know the story, he spits in the clay, he makes a paste, he puts it on the guy's eyes, he tells him to go wash his eyes, and when he does, the guy can see. I just love the fact that Jesus just kind of breaks all these ideas we have. And he just does it with such an attitude. Maybe it's the attitude I like about Jesus. And this caused a big stir, the fact that this guy can now see. It caused a big stir for a few reasons. One, he did it on the Sabbath. He violated the Sabbath law. The Pharisees knew that he could not possibly be from God because he violated the Sabbath. How could he be doing good works on the Sabbath? Because everyone knows you would just let a blind man be blind if you were from God. Crazy. So they call the blind man to them and ask him some questions. How did he do this? Who is this guy? What do you think this guy is? He finally admits, I think he's probably a prophet. The Pharisees call his parents. Was your son actually blind from birth? Is this the guy? Yes, this is the guy. He was blind from birth. They don't want to take too much of a stand. So they say, you talk to him. He's got all the answers. And so when they brought him back, in John chapter 9, verse 25, this is one of the most powerful verses in the entire Bible for me. He replied to the Pharisees, whether he's a sinner or not, I do not know. One thing I do know, I was blind, but now I see. Boy, is that not the story of every single one of us who have come to Christ? I don't really know all the details of the transformation that he made in my heart. I don't know how it works. You want a story of how my faith came to this? I don't have one. But I know one thing. I was blind, but now I see. Sometimes that is all it takes. Sometimes to express your belief, your transformation to somebody is that I was blind, but now I see. He went from blindness, unbelieving, to sight, which was faith building. He still hadn't received completely. When Jesus had heard that they were giving him a hard time, Jesus called him back. And I'm going to read a little bit. We have up here, I think we have verse 38, 9:38. I'm going to read just a few verses ahead of that. I'm going to read from verse 35. Jesus heard they had thrown him out, and he went and found him. He asked him, do you believe in the Son of Man? The man said, point him out to me, sir, so that I can believe in him. You know, I'm ready to believe now. I'm ready to believe. I've got my sight. I believe that you care about me. You tell me who I need to believe in, and I will believe. Jesus said, you're looking right at him. Don't you recognize my voice? Master, I believe. The man said, and worshiped him. What a picture of a transformation from no faith to faith. What an amazing building block this man had from unbelief to belief. I've had some pretty substantial faith growth experiences in my life. I've seen numerous healings. Maybe the fact that I'm Thomas, God has allowed me to see these things. I'm not sure. I remember one time, I think I was 12 years old. My dad went to a Bible school called International Bible College. I went there also for a year in San Antonio, Texas. My dad was a missionary in Mexico, and I'm wrapping this up, by the way. IBC, International Bible College, had a service once a year in Mexico for all the missionaries that had been at IBC. And the meeting this year, I think it was in Durango, Mexico, but I was 12, I was young. That may not be correct. But I remember going in, we were late getting there. I remember walking into the service, and it is a typical Mexican service. It is on fire, man. It is pumping. The music's pumping. They turn those amps up to 11, and they get this place moving. And we're kind of standing in the back because we're late. And the speaker kind of walks up to the microphone, and he kind of calms everybody down. Everything gets quiet. He says, God's telling me, giving me a word right now. And I think I need to say it. And he said, God's telling me that 3 of the missionaries that are here today at this meeting, and there was probably 20, are going to be taken from us this year. Like, what? I mean, this was, you talk about dropping a wet blanket on a service that was roaring. He just prophesied that there are going to be 3 missionaries die this year. That is a bold prophecy. It will be very easy to check that prophecy next year because we're coming back next year. Well, that year, Johnny Iles, Warren Witt, and David Yeager all died in the line of duty, so to speak, on the mission field. I and my father were with David Yeager when he died. He died in Oklahoma City, procuring lumber to take to Mexico. He died on a job site that I was on. I witnessed one of those deaths, and I knew the other one. How do you walk away from that experience not having more faith in God? Well, you don't. And why did God do that? Why did God take those men of God away from their families, from their ministry, from the people that love them? I don't know. But I know that despite doing it, he used it as an opportunity to build my faith and the faith of about 200 other people. Why now? Why this message now? Why, when Troy asked me to speak, did God say to me, I want you to speak on faith? This is such a rudimentary concept for Christians. This is so base. This is nothing, this is something you've all heard a million times. I only can imagine that God has something planned for us, our body, right now, with the events that have occurred recently, that he is interested in taking our faith and growing our faith to a point maybe that we've not had it yet. Mitzi, I know, can attest to that. There is a generational decline when God does something to you that you cannot put on your children. When God parted the Red Sea, after that point, he was known forever as the God who parted the Red Sea. Now, to that first generation that went through the Red Sea, it was a pretty powerful thing. Well, to the kids that were young when that happened, that was a pretty powerful thing. To the grandkids who weren't born yet, they probably saw how it affected their parents and grandparents' lives, but it didn't really affect them. Well, how about to the generation after that, and to the generation after that? It loses some impact. When Christ was raised from the dead, the disciples were impacted greatly, to the point where they all died martyrs' deaths. How much is it impacting us right now? Well, it's not that it's not impacting us at all. But the fact is, perhaps because of our limitations as a human, we need to see God encourage our faith in situations that apply directly to us. I have relayed all these stories to my children. Well, my neighbor, when my father was going to Bible school, was deaf in one ear. And one night, we got a knock on the door from a pastor that was speaking, knew he was deaf and wanted to pray for him on our porch. It was a duplex. So we go out there, the guy simply, no fanfare, prays for him, and his instantly healed from being deaf out of his right ear. Well, that's a pretty powerful experience when you're a 13-year-old kid. I remember it to this day. Maybe it happened only so that I could tell you about it right now. I don't know. I don't know what God's plan was in that. Maybe it was just because he loved the guy and wanted him to be able to hear. Maybe it was to show somebody in his family who was unbelieving that God can heal. I don't really know. But I do know God healed him, that he was blind and then he could see, metaphorically speaking. Connection Church right now, we're going, let me rephrase it, we're receiving a journey of faith boost, whether we realize it or not. The fact that we are all here, that we are all still here, that we are worshiping God, that we are living literally by faith, sometimes day to day. Paris, Troy, are building the finances. I pray that we can receive that faith boost that God is giving us right now. And that's how I want to end it. I want to pray that this idea, this concept, this message of faith is something that we learn to live in on a daily basis. Pray with me if you would. Heavenly Father, you are a God, as I said earlier in prayer, that sees the beginning from the end, that has a perspective on eternity that we do not have. And I thank you for those glimpses into your perspective. I thank you that those glimpses give us faith. Give us faith in you. Give us faith in the direction you are taking our church. Give us faith in the direction that you are taking our lives personally. Father, I have never been more convinced than I am right now that you have a place for Connection Church in the city of Grand Junction. That you have a place for every one of us in Connection Church. And I thank you for the difficult times you have given us, and now that it has allowed our faith to be boosted. Go with us this week in faith believing. In your name, Jesus. Amen. Amen. Thank you so much.